Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Fic Fiction, a magical bookish podcast for chaotic story goblins. In this week's episode, The Books That Made Us, we'll be going back in time to discuss our own reading lore, including the books that we grew up with, the authors that shaped us into the readers we are today. We are your hosts, Crimson,
Molly,
and Ali. Wow, okay. Hi guys. Welcome to the second episode. How are you both?
off with a bang. Yeah, pretty good.
Fab. So what I thought we would do, because I know that we didn't really do this in the first episode, is that we're going to sort of introduce every episode with a little how has our week been? So what we've been up to in our own personal lives, if you would like to share that, and also what have you been reading? So Molly, would you like to start us off?
Not a whole bloody lot, to be honest. Just work. It's been pretty dull. Reading is probably the most interesting thing that has happened. So in terms of what I finished this week, I read The X-Hex, which is by Erin Sterling, I believe, and that was pretty cute. And I also finished The Tomb of the Sun King by Jacqueline Benson, which took me literally a month to get through. And I'm not saying literally a month in that it was bad. It was just like over 600 pages. And I had about 6 billion other things that I was reading at the same time. So it was a proper slog to get through.
That's a long book.
Yeah, it is pretty long. I mean, it was an arc, and I started reading before it was released, and I didn't finish till after it had already been released.
Wow. Okay. Would you recommend it though?
It's excellent. Yeah, it's the sequel to Empire Shadows, which is giving Indiana Jones, The Mummy kind of vibes. It was great.
That sounds good. That really does sound good. What about you, Crimson?
For me, yeah, life has been good. Mostly just working, but doing a little bit of reading too. I am still working on Fourth Wing, so I haven't finished anything because I've been pretty focused on Fourth Wing. I've just gotten through The Threshing. I obviously don't want to give anything away, but I did post a TikTok about some of my reactions to that because, yeah, I definitely was taken aback, a little bit surprised, but not that surprised, but I'm having a great time with it.
Did you scream? Because I physically was like, ah.
So that's why you need to go see the TikTok, because literally, yes, but whisper screaming, because my husband was literally asleep in the next room. So I didn't know, but I was literally like I was having a meltdown, but also couldn't really express myself the way that I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, I read it when it first came out, and I remember thinking, both the first time I read it and the time that I reread it before Iron Flame, I was like, excuse the fuck me, sir, what are you doing? The whole time.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, actually, that this series gets compared so much to ACOTAR, because it's such a different vibe. I get why, of course, but it's very heavy on the war crime for sure, and I'm into it.
I always find that comparison really bizarre. The only thing that I can think is the link between the genres, and the fact that if you like ACOTAR, you probably got a good chance of liking Fourth Wing, but they're so different, conceptually. Sure. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, for me, even though I'm only halfway through the first book, it's so clear to me that SJM's writing is very character driven, and it's the things that are happening in the world are definitely a commentary on something, but very much through the lens of this one character. Whereas I feel like Yaros's writing is so much more about the morality of what's going on around Violet, as well as what Violet's going through herself. So I think it's a very different vibe. It's so weird to me.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Ali? What are you reading? Or what have you just finished reading?
Oh, well, I did just finish Belladonna, because I know that we buddy read that book. So I was a little bit behind in finishing that compared to you, because I was obviously not on time, as usual.
Valid.
I am currently reading Gothicana, or I'm just about to finish Gothicana. It's a dark academia, spooky vibe. I feel like I'm coming into my dark academia era a little bit, but I haven't read much in the past week because I have been really busy with work, and also I went to see the ice hockey, which was really fun. but I'm hoping that I can finish Gothicana very soon in the next, maybe
I love
tonight.
that
Maybe
for
I'll finish
you.
it tonight. I would say I'm not a dark academia girly off the bat, but I can see the appeal. I could definitely see the appeal because I'm really, really enjoying it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are definitely like niche within the dark academia genre. I feel like you kind of just have to like find some of the like tropes and genres within dark academia that you vibe with.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's like a bit of spiciness in it somewhere, as long as there's a hot guy, a hot academic guy somewhere in there, I'm all for it. I don't care if he ends up being like the villain or an issue, or as long as we shag him, it's fine.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean,
Villains need love too.
if anything, it just improves the book in my eyes. So,
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
so let us kick off the first topic for today and talk a bit about the books from the first stage of our lives. So think children's books, middle grade, preteen, specifically separating like middle grade and preteen because there is kind of like a bridge between those two, but they're also quite different. So Crimson, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so starting off with kids' books in middle grade, definitely I have been reading, I think we talked about last time, since like before I was even in school. Reading was a big part of growing up for me. And once I was in school and at the age where I could kind of read on my own, it was a lot of AR books. I was an advanced reader, so a lot of like weird classic literature, way too early to be reading classic literature. Definitely I read Little Women when I think I was in fourth grade, which is way too early to really
Crazy.
understand what's going on in there. Yeah.
That is like a young age to be reading Little Women. Did you take any of it in?
I think so, but definitely not like not in a deep way at all. Like I definitely understood like that there was an element of sexism here, but I definitely didn't fully grasp like what was going on. One of the first like kind of age appropriate things I was reading at the time was definitely The Babysitter's Club. Like everybody I knew was into those books, and like Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants and all of those kind of earlier books about like female friendship were in there. But I was always going to be like a fantasy and sci-fi girly, I think. Like Harry Potter was huge in my childhood. I would say it's probably like the most influential book that I read when I was kids was that series. And I kind of grew up with it in the sense of I was the same age Harry was as the books were going out. So like I really identified with them a lot. I also was a big fan of the Shadow Children series that starts with Among the Hidden. I was a big fan of his Dark Materials, The Giver, Hatchet, and Bartimaeus trilogy. Lots of fantasy, lots of escapism, but with the commentary on how dark the world could be. But
you were really into like some sort of like not like darker concepts, but you weren't into as light of fantasy as a kid, really, were you? You were into them more sort of like starting to get into sort of heavy fantasy quite early on.
Yeah, so as an example, when everybody else started reading Chronicles of Narnia, I really didn't vibe with it. Like I enjoyed the first book, but then and I read the second book and I just sort of fell off of it. And then when I found his Dark Materials, which is similar vibes but like darker thematically, I was way more into it. So yeah, I was always kind of I think looking to like understand like the darker realities around us through my reading.
It's like a lot of deep thinking going on. Whereas I'm just like, ooh, fairies.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing all of that too. I just wasn't like, I don't know, like it's not the stuff that stuck with me, is the thing.
The stuff you remember will be what really impacted you.
Yeah. To answer what I think you were gonna ask, his Dark Materials is The Golden Compass.
Yeah, I thought so. That's what I was going to ask. I remember I've never read his Dark Materials. Like I've never read the actual books, but I remember watching The Golden Compass and like the movie that they made and being traumatized.
The movie's terrible. Don't judge it off the movie. But the new series on HBO is really good, actually.
Oh, is it? I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, that's I think a really great adaptation. And also the books, I believe there's 4 in total now, but there were originally 3. It was originally a trilogy, so it's not that long of a journey. I would highly recommend it. Yeah, so the books are, you know, it's talking animals, but it's definitely much darker and to do with like the soul, and at some point it's kind of it's definitely a different take. Like he was not religious, but it is a different take on like the original sin story and things like that towards the end. So it's a really, and it explores a lot of really interesting themes about like parentage and love, familial love and friendship and all these different things. So interesting world for sure.
A worthwhile read.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Also, who doesn't want like a built-in best friend, like a physical manifestation of your soul walking around next to you?
What would your physical manifestation of your soul be? That's a good question for both of you, or for all of us, I guess.
I want it to be a red panda, but that's probably not true.
I could see you as a red panda kind of gal.
100%.
I think I would need to be something that's got a little more darkness to it. Like, I think one of the main characters, his is a snow leopard, and that one makes a lot of sense for me, I think, too, because they're elusive and they seem really sweet and cuddly, but they're actually very, like, scary. And so I think there's a lot of depth to that kind of choice. So maybe something like that. But what about you two?
I'd I'd want to be something that is like well badass, but at the same time I know that it would probably be like a house cat, because
I was just thinking that for me too.
Like it's a constant thing between me and my husband that I am an indoor cat. Like I don't like going outside. I'm not particularly fond of people. I just want to curl up and take a nap and ignore humanity. So, you know, a house cat's probably very on point for me.
That's really interesting you say that, because I was going to say the same thing. Like, I love being anywhere where it's warm. Like, as soon as Alex leaves his side of the bed, I'm in his side of the bed, like, getting the heat. I don't want to leave the house. Cats can also be they're very, I don't want to say controlling, but they're very in control. And I'm very like that with, like, schedules and structures and things. So maybe we're both going to be cats in our next lives or something.
Interesting thing, and this is not a spoiler, it's just lore, is the shape of your demon changes, like what kind of animal it is can change at a whim until you've finished puberty. And when you finish puberty, there's like a settling where the final form is sort of chosen, and then it's always that for the rest of your life. And so not only is the final form indicative of your personality, but it's also indicative sometimes of like what jobs you're suited for. So for instance, it's a very class-based society, and like if you're a servant, almost always your demon's going to be a dog. And a lot of the people who work in government have like snakes or spiders or these kind of like more insidious things. So
I need to read this series.
How did I not know this series was so like in depth and like
oh my god, it's
complex?
Insane. And
like how?
And there's culture around, like, for instance, you're never supposed to speak to someone's demon directly unless like sometimes if you're like their soulmate you could, but typically like you would never speak to someone else's demon even though they're right there and they can speak out loud. And also you typically have a very close relationship, but there is a particular character who literally never speaks to hers and is very violent with hers, and that is very indicative of like how she is inside and what's wrong with her. And like, so it's really cool, actually. It's like really, really cool.
I need to get on this series.
Yeah, me too. If I add to the TBR
immediately. It feels like it would be a good January read. I don't know why, but it screams January to me.
I think that makes sense because a huge part of the first book, especially the climax of the first book, happens in winter, like in the mountains. So I think that would be fitting. But okay, so we've talked through my childhood reads and how dark they got. So Molly, what were you reading as a kid?
Okay, so when we're talking like children's, I mean like up to probably like the age of like 7 or 8. But so we spoke in the last episode, like I was a big like fairy orientated child. So I was reading like the rainbow fairy books and the flower fairy books and I had Winnie the Pooh. I still have my omnibus, I guess, of Winnie the Pooh from when I was a child. I read this book, and it was called The Adventures of Teddy Robinson, and it was like my first ever chapter book, and it was about a teddy bear. Yeah, so definitely not very dark and like serious, dealing with like themes like Crimson. But then I kind of like segued into things like, do you guys remember the like Egyptology book from when it was like a picture book? And they had like a whole series. So I had the Fairyopolis one, which was like the flower fairies book, and it was essentially like a field guide. Now they had like an Egypt themed one. I was an Egypt kid, and it was called Egyptology, and it was basically going through everything like ancient Egypt and like the mummification process and the pyramids. And I never got it, and I was like proper pressed about it, and I still kind of am, because those books were so freaking cool. So I loved those. I remember like distinctively going into the bookshop and looking at this book and thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like the first proper series that I remember reading was like Crimson. It was Harry Potter, because that was the series that you read when you were like growing up, especially like as like a British like primary school student. Like I remember getting the first copy of Philosopher's Stone, and it kind of like set everything for me, and I'd say like shapes the way I read going forward. And it was kind of like, okay, now I'm a fantasy girly like for forever.
That pushed you in.
Oh, for sure. So it kind of made me dip my toe into stuff that I did in like the middle grade preteen like reading era. So obviously I read like some of the things that the other girls were reading, like the Princess Diaries books, which were 100% different from the films. Like if
Oh, really?
I don't know if you've ever read them, but they were completely different from
never.
the films. Madly different. Like for one, her dad is alive.
Oh,
Her dad is alive.
That's weird. Does she not have a sibling or something?
She does.
And she like becomes friends with like the mean girl or something, because our best friend is like a real asshole in like the books.
Yeah. They were completely different. And obviously her grandmother was also kind of a bitch. But obviously Julie Andrews was like, oh yeah, I'll play this part. And the producers went to Meg Cabot and were like, look, Julie Andrews wants this role. So they rewrote the whole role around Julie Andrews, which obviously great choice, brilliant, because you can't have Julie Andrews playing somebody that isn't an icon, you know?
Yeah.
So I read those books, and then that was when I was starting to get into things like Twilight, Percy Jackson, and I still to this day read everything that Uncle Rick produces, writes, because he is just fantastic and he is wholesome and I love him.
Have you seen the TV series yet?
Oh my god, yes.
Have you watched it? I have had it on my list for so long, but I haven't actually watched it yet. Is it worth moving up my list a little bit?
Oh my god, yes. So you know how as readers, when we get film and TV adaptations, they are always disappointing. Like in some way or format, they're always disappointing. This was like the first TV adaptation of a book series that I've been like, that is the book. That is exactly the book.
He had a hand in that though, didn't he? Like he directed it and wrote it, and like, because he didn't like the initial movie.
He detests the movies that they made with Logan Lerman. And look, they're not bad movies in and of themselves if they weren't based around a book, but they are not true to the books in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, especially they all look about like 18.
Yeah, they're like, dude, they're supposed to be 12 and they're 18, like 18, 19. They're adults. They're grown-ass men playing like children. Like it's never gonna go well. But yeah, no, he hated them. Like he hated them with a passion. So he had like quite a strong role in the TV series. But yeah, definitely highly recommend you move that up. But then I think the next big series that I read after Percy Jackson was Vampire Academy. So I remember sitting in like 6th, 7th grade reading these and like getting through them at an insane pace. And somebody else in my class that I was sat next to was reading them with me. as like my first ever buddy read kind of like experience, and it was really sweet. But obviously like Vampire Academy was super like angsty, probably not something I should have been reading in class in 7th grade, so that would be like year 6 in the UK.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, so that is around the same time that I had started reading fan fiction as well. So all the pieces come together. But yeah, obviously like that is also when I started reading City of Bones, but I didn't really get properly into the series until I was a bit older. But that is me. What about you, Ali? What were you reading?
Right. Where do I even begin? Okay, for whenever we look at children's books, this is not something I like to admit to other people in my life, but I was, you know, when you were in school and there was that one kid that would like ungodly pretend to be a horse at every opportunity. That was me.
You were the horse girl.
I remember, like, honestly, like, we used to go to this park and we used to sit on the walls of this park and pretend they were horses. So for anyone walking past us, we were just dry humping some walls.
Nice.
Like,
I know they're horses.
who
So
was
what's
I
funny
in another
is that
life?
I have a feeling that whatever you're about to say as far as books that the horse girls were reading, I read all of those books. I just didn't put them on my list, but I was friends with the horse girls, so I read all the horse girl books too.
Love it. So
Yeah.
there are like 2 that come to mind. As I've got like 3 things on my children's list. The 2 of them are to do with horses. So the first one is Magic Ponies. So Magic Ponies were by Sue Bentley, and I think there was like 6 or 7 of them, and I just remember they were just horses that had magical powers or something. Like,
I love that.
but I was so into them, and Black Beauty as well. So I was a horse girl. So anything, I mean, like anything unicorns. Maybe that's why I like Skander and the Unicorn Thief, that new middle grade series, so much, because it's just got horses in it. Well, unicorns, but you know, same things.
I also think for me, I grew up in Oklahoma, which is like cattle country, cowboys, all that stuff, and my dad is really into country western stuff, and so I think I thought like maybe if I like read about all these like ranch and horse themed like books, like we'll be able to connect on country stuff.
Some sort of level.
Not even like
that is
he's
like
not a horse girl. But
that is so sweet. I'm sorry, that is really so cute. Sweet and cute. Bless you.
Yeah, I did that a few times. I would like try to listen to like when I got older, when I was in college, I would try to listen to like music from like the 60s and 70s, because that was when he was like in his teens and 20s, and I would always pick the wrong shit. Like I would always like I'd be like, oh, I'm really into the Beatles now, and my dad would be like, yeah, I really didn't like them once they started taking drugs, and I'm like, oh, okay, like never mind.
Nothing like trying to bond with your family.
What's that?
Yeah. But I'm with you. Black Beauty. I read Black Beauty.
Black Beauty was traumatizing. I have not seen the film, and I don't want to see the film.
I wouldn't. I remember sobbing. Like, and I wasn't a horse girly, but I remember it like traumatizing me.
Do any of you guys remember that movie about the dog?
Well, that's vague.
No, the one that dies.
Lassie.
I can't remember.
Dies.
No.
Do you mean Marley?
Old Yeller dies.
Yeah! Marley and Me.
Is so depressing.
I watched Marley and Me, and I was in my grandparents' house in England, and they were like, hey, put this on, you can go watch this for a bit, it'll be a nice movie for you. Was it? No. But yeah, I suppose other than the horse books then, like whenever I was an actual child, it was Jacqueline Wilson. Like Jacqueline Wilson was like my thing. I had all the Jacqueline Wilson books. I remember my favourite ones were the Heady Feather one. She like runs away to join a circus or something. I can't remember exactly what she does. Candy Floss, Little Darlings as well was really good. And the Bread and Breakfast Star. I was never really into like Dustbin Baby and the really, really horrible, like hard-hitting ones, but I remember Jacqueline Wilson was like a big part of my childhood, and I just bought her new book, the one that she released recently, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, I never read any of her books. I remember being like a really big fan of Tracy Beaker and my parents being concerned that it was giving me a bad attitude. but I never actually read any Jacqueline Wilson books. And I feel like I've missed out because a lot of kids.
I feel like you should.
I feel like a lot of
I really
kids
enjoyed them.
say that they shaped them and like inspired them.
They do shape you in a way when you read them. They do. They touch on subjects that probably children sometimes shouldn't touch on, but I really enjoyed them. And then there was middle grade. It's some middle grade books. I still read middle grade books now. Percy Jackson, the same as Molly, was also on my list. I actually prefer the Heroes of Olympus series, like the second series, rather than Percy Jackson itself. But the other books that I would read in sort of that time were anything by Rainbow Rowell. So like Eleanor and Park, Fangirl, Carry On. I loved all of her books. I have Carry On my shelf. I'm looking at it right now, but I recently bought it to reread that series because there's 3 of those books now. I didn't realize it was a series. I only ever read the first one. And Under the Hawthorn Tree. I know we spoke about this in episode 1, but all of a sudden was reading like this. I don't know if it's a trilogy, but I think there's 3 books about the potato famine in Ireland. But like weirdly, like this is what I read as a kid because I didn't come into, well, obviously we're discussing like teen and YA later. That's when I really started getting into like books properly. Other than that, it was sort of fan fiction at about age sort of 12, 13. And I was really into sort of like Fall Out Boy, Blackfield Brides, Pierce the Veil. And then also like randomly also like Justin Bieber. Like, I don't know.
See, I never read the band fics. I never read the band fics.
Reading quite a bit before you, but Fallout Boy. So the time that I was reading fanfics, it was Fallout Boy, MCR, Academy Is, like that entire like sort of Warp 2 tour group.
Yeah.
It was all of that. So yeah, I'm 100% on the
feel like I fell in love, like the way I picked my favorite person out of the band was probably due to a fanfic that I read. Like for a while, like I like, for example, like when it was like talking about like All Time Low or whatever, I was really into Alex as just like I was like, you're my favorite, but the reason he was my favorite is because all the fanfics about him were better than the other band members.
I only discovered that men's thighs were interesting because of Patrick Stump fanfic, like for sure, like 100%.
Wild.
Because
I love that for you.
Fanfic, they are always talking about Patrick Stump's juicy thighs, like always.
And valid. A thigh girly now.
Love it.
Yeah.
Oh god, fanfic was just like a wild. We will do a whole episode on fanfic, I think, at some point because we've got to dive into that.
Many.
Yeah, there's going to be like segments of this, I believe.
The best 100%. Part about band fanfic, because I think a lot of people who read fanfic realize that it's pretty popular to have like your fanfic follow like song lyrics or be based off of song lyrics. But the best part about band fanfic is that it was like based on the song lyrics that band sang, that the people. So it was just like so much more. It was like they're writing for each other. It was so intense. Like,
were you I know we spoke about this previously, but you said that you liked when the band members would date rather than like I was a like I am this band member's sister. I am a self-insert girly. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was shipping. So I didn't really get into fanfic until high school, but I was shipping bandmates together, or like dudes from different bands together. So like it was
I've been there.
Like Pete and Patrick and Gerard Way with William Beckett, and like I was shipping real people with each other, not fantasizing so much about inserting myself, but that's because I was also reading Harry Potter and fanfic like heavily, and I like definitely in my mind at the time I was Hermione, so same thing, it's fine.
It's like you were Pete Wentz, like in that time.
Yeah. And with Harry Potter, it was, I mean, we'll talk about it more later, but it was interesting because the books still weren't all out yet when I started reading. So like the Harry Potter content was actually much lighter at the time than it typically is now. So
that's true. Okay, so what I would thought we would do is just split this up a little bit. I know that we're going to play lots of games throughout the podcast. So I have a game for you guys. I told you really briefly off the pod what it is. So we're going to play friend or foe. So the idea for anyone who's listening is that we pick two villains or two characters who are seen as not even villains, but just like not bad characters, but you know, the problematic characters. And the idea is that you have to decide if they are a friend or a foe. So you get two of them. You have to decide which one you would friend and which one you would keep as your own personal villain in that context, if that makes any sense. I will go first. So the two characters I have chosen, and you have to pick who is your friend and who is your foe. I have chosen Voldemort from Harry Potter and Tamlin from ACOTAR.
Voldemort or Tom Riddle?
Voldemort.
Okay.
I mean, I'm ready.
Okay, go. Let's hear it.
Okay, I think Voldemort is foe because he's literally genocidal. And Tamlin is the friend because he sucks so bad. And I think he's an abuser. Like, I hate Tamlin, but I can see him. He has decent intentions, whereas Voldemort, zero good intentions. That guy's a sociopath.
Valid. Yeah.
What about you,
I'm-
Molly?
I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to say, look, I have good reasons here. It's not because of the genocide, obviously. So, so Voldemort,
You heard it here
obviously.
first. Molly is
Got some problems.
You don't want the bad guy on as an enemy. Okay, you can deal with right.
Okay.
You can deal with Tamlin being a little bitch. Like, that's just, another Tuesday. But he's not going to do much, is he? He's just there. And I mean, it's not like I've got to screw Voldemort. I just got to, be a polite acquaintance. Like, how was your weekend?
Here?
Go for it.
Because here's the thing. I think that's what Lucius Malfoy thought.
Oh,
And
100%.
it wasn't really working out so well for him at the end.
No, it wasn't. But at the same time, like, I could probably put up with Voldemort complaining about Harry Potter, but having Tamlin bitch about literally, everything would be a bad day for me.
I think Voldemort's
Do you get me?
a little more than.
Look,
I get you.
I know he's a bad guy, but I don't want him to be up in my business. Like, he's like the last person that I want to be coming after me. Like, we know how well that went with Harry. He had a literal Horcrux in him. So,
No, sure. I just think with Voldemort, I'd like to be Hermione's parents. Like, lose my memory, go to Australia, know nothing about it. Like, that would be fine. For me, still he's an enemy. But with Tamlin, it's like, I'd like to be Reese. Like, Tamlin's like off in his own thing. I don't have to talk to him really, but like maybe he can help out when I need like his stuff.
See, I think the
That's so
question
interesting.
here is for Ali. Like, how close of a friend do we have to be with them? Like, do we have to be going and getting our nails done together? Or, is it okay if we just say hi?
Walking up to like get your nails done together. I think to be a friend, you do have to like occasionally have a coffee with them.
See, and this is why
Or
I
visit
asked
their
if
house.
Oh,
This is why I
God.
asked if it's Tom Riddle or Voldemort, because if it's Tom Riddle, that guy was hot, like maybe you could convince him not to do all the snake stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I said the same as Molly, though. I said that I would be friendly with Voldemort because, like, I obviously don't appreciate the fact that he's, like, murdering folk, or causing, mass genocide, or is just, like, he's just an all-around problematic man. But I wouldn't mind maybe, like, going for a little coffee with him or seeing inside of his house. But Tamlin gives me the ick. And I feel like I couldn't deal with the cringiness of him. Like, at least Voldemort, like, he's like, yeah, I'm a bad guy.
At least
And
he
what?
owns it, right?
Also, so the other thing is, I am mildly afraid of snakes, and I think Voldemort sort of comes with Nagini. And so, like, I don't know.
See, I
that would be
like
tough for me.
snakes. I like snakes, so I'm not that fussed.
I like them as imagery. I don't love them in person.
They're just
Like,
little danger noodles.
yeah,
It's
that's
fine.
the problem. She literally eats people. She might eat me.
I mean,
Only if you're on his bad side.
yeah,
which
so be his
happens
friend,
in the
Crimson.
blink of an eye.
God, guys. Oh, dear. Anyway, moving swiftly forward, Molly, what characters do you have for us?
Okay. Umbridge.
Right.
Dolores Umbridge. Or President Snow from the Hunger Games.
I want to
So
be friends with Umbridge because she has cats.
So Dolores
Okay.
Umbridge or President Snow?
I think Umbridge. I think she's more fun.
Yeah, I would friend her. She has a cute outfit. She has cute little pink outfits, and she also loves cats, so that's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, who hasn't known a really shitty mean girl that's still fun to be friends with, right? Like, it's fine. I just think Snow seems boring. Like, I don't think he's doing anything interesting.
Does. He kind of just like sits there and drinks tea. Like, I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's going to have a good tea selection.
He doesn't
That's
seem
true.
like he's good at a gossip, though. That's what I
Yeah, but
found.
at least there wouldn't be any Veritaserum in your tea with President Snow.
Mm.
But there will definitely be some with Umbridge.
I
But
speak my mind
you
anyway.
can-
That wouldn't bother me.
Mm.
You can beat Veritaserum, so it's fine. If I lived in Harry Potter world, I would have already learned how to do that for sure. Do not get answers out of me.
Fair, valid.
Interesting. That was a quick one.
Slytherin back.
Yeah.
Crimson. What have
Crimson.
you got for us?
Kale or Peter Pettigrew.
Oh no.
Okay, I've got it.
Oh, I think I'm gonna have to be friends with Kale.
Yeah.
Opposite.
Oh, he's so childish. Maybe I can teach him how to act like an adult.
See, my thought process is like having Kale as your enemy means that you also have like Dorian as your enemy. But if you have Peter Pettigrew as your enemy, no one's going to give a shit because it's Peter Pettigrew.
Oh, but
I don't
Molly.
think you do, though. I don't think you do because, like, Rowan and Dorian are fine, and Rowan really doesn't like Kale.
Yeah, but it's not like Dorian has the same relationship with Rowan as he does with Kale. Like, Dorian and Kale are essentially brothers, you know?
No, sure, and you're never going to break that down. But I don't think, as wonderful as Dorian is, I can't have Dorian anyway because of circumstances. So if I can't have Dorian, like, for real, then it'll be okay to not be friends with him because I can't deal with Kale. I'm okay with that. Peter, depending on the time period, he could come with all the Marauders. So that's fine.
Oh yeah, actually
You're going to
I
have to
might
bring in
change
the
my
time
answer.
period. You're going to have to specify which time period then. Because if Remus Lupin is on the table, then...
You will be on the table with him. Like,
Exactly.
I'm going to swap. I'm going to say that I'm going to friend Peter for the reason, and there's two reasons for this. One is the fact that I could go and shag Sirius Black, and that's
I'm with you.
the dream.
Share,
Also, maybe you can have him on Tuesdays if you would like. But the other option is that if I am enemies or foes with Kale and Dorian doesn't like me, enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
And I get an enemies to lovers trope in my life. That's so.
And also either way it kind of works because even if it's later Peter and you just don't know or have justified why he's such a shit, like you can enemies to lovers Remus or Sirius. So I mean, as long as you're not going after James, like you're probably okay.
Nobody
Yeah,
would want to go
probably
after
fine.
James anyway.
Yeah, there are
Well, you can
issues
have 'em.
there. Fabulous, guys.
Well, that was a fantastic game, but I think we need to continue our journey down memory lane and talk about the books we loved as teens and in the YA genre. So for me, I mean, it's a little more of the same. I don't think there's any huge surprises here. I got even more into dystopia and a little bit of sci-fi. So I was reading Feed by M.T. Anderson, which is basically like a cyberpunk world where we have chips in our brain that like we have the internet like in our eyeballs, seeing everything around us. So that's kind of what that's about. I also read and have a very distinct memory of reading The Last Book in the Universe, which is about a world where people similarly kind of have injected into them, like entertainment, like uploaded to their brain, and then they get really, really addicted to it. And the main character cannot participate in this because he has epilepsy. Actually, in both of these books, I think it was something where either the main character or like a very pivotal side character had like an adverse medical reaction to this technology. And so those were really interesting kind of examinations of the kind of darker sides of all of the new technology that was coming out at the time. Also, Downsiders by Neil Shusterman, which is about like a alternate society that's living underground in New York City and what happens when someone from society falls in love with someone above. It's actually one of the first romances I remember reading, interestingly enough. But also I was also really impacted by some of the more lit fic stuff that I was reading. I read The Life of Pi in school, but it turned out to be like one of the more influential books of my life. My cat is actually named after that book. Definitely still Harry Potter. I went to every midnight release when I was a teenager. Started reading a lot of fan fiction. I started as a Harmony girly, but very quickly became a Jerry and Hermione girly. And also read a lot of fanfics like we talked about, and a lot of Kingdom Hearts fan fiction, actually. And I also was playing a lot of video games at the time, and also started reading a lot of manga. So I went through a whole manga phase in high school. And then towards the later half of high school was Twilight and things like that.
Amazing. I love how you went from like dark dystopia and then like, ooh, a little bit of lit flick here, and then manga, and then still going into fanfics, like staying true to who you are.
Fanfics are never leaving.
Never.
No, never, can't. Although I did take, like, after that in college and then in my 20s, I didn't read that much fanfic. I would go back to it every now and again, but I really wasn't like deeply in the community at all until 2020.
Interesting.
So I was reading a lot of fantasy still. I said briefly a bit earlier that I had started reading City of Bones, so I got really into the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices, and I think paranormal romance got really popular around this time. So I was reading Linger, which is, I never actually knew that it had like a full series name, but it was The Walls of Mercy Falls by Maggie Stiefvater. And I was really into those. I remember those. And then I went through like an angel kind of like era. So books about angels and like seraphim. So I was reading Fallen by Lauren Kate, which I love the concept of even now. So like lovers that have met in every lifetime and fallen in love and something has happened. I also read Hush Hush, which is like the first like morally grey male character that I can remember distinctly in my memory. Halo, which is another angel series. I was reading a lot of paranormal romance. I think Kelly Armstrong had like a really good trilogy around that time. It's called The Darkest Powers, and they had like lots of different paranormal beings in it, so like witches and shifters and like lots of different powers going on. But around that time, like probably like 14, 15, I was also getting into books that probably again were not something that should have been on my radar, but they 100% were. So I was reading, like I said, Twilight, which pushed me into the Sookie Stackhouse books. So the books that inspired True Blood. I loved those. I ate those up. They were great. And yeah, I kind of moved into the like more adult books then. I mean, I was like 14, 15. It's kind of ridiculous. I did go back to more like traditionally like YA books, so reading like Fault in Our Stars.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Had a bit of a John Green
existed.
Right, like a John Green tortured teen contemporary romance blip.
Yeah.
Before moving back to like my traditional fantasy books. So I started reading Sarah J Maas when I was about 17, 18. And I still read her today. And obviously, like Crimson, I was still reading fan fiction. I was also a Harmony girl. But then I moved into like Hermione, and then my lifelong ship that I will take absolutely no criticism of, no matter who you are, but I am a Hermione girl through and through. So no criticism anywhere.
No criticism, but like minor concerns.
Go for it. Yeah, I love that. What about you, Ali?
So, where do I even begin? I started off my teens, I want to say, with a lot of standalones. I wasn't a big series girly for some reason. I think maybe the Magic Ponies put me off. I don't know. But series were like not a thing. There was a lot of standalones. I remember a lot of John Green. I think I read a lot of John Green as well. I can't remember any of them other than The Fault in Our Stars. But I remember
Paper
I looked at my
Towns.
Goodreads earlier. Paper Towns, yeah, I remember Paper Towns.
Yeah.
God, yeah. Wow, what a throwback.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of standalones. So things like Counting by Sevens, Beautiful Broken Things, Everything, Chemical Hearts, Holding Up the Universe. Like I was really in an interesting rabbit hole of books. But once I kind of got out of that and I sort of reached the age of 15, then I started getting more into series. So there was like 3 series I remember really vividly in my sort of like younger teens. And that was the Ali Carter books, the Gallagher Girls series, that series about like spies. Did you ever read
Oh
that?
my god, I remember seeing that.
I think about that series on a daily basis. Like, I swear to God, I want to reread them again. They're so good.
Is that your Roman Empire?
Yeah, I think my Roman Empire. And I remember being so young because I didn't have a lot of social media whenever they first were coming out. And I remember I got one, and then I remember like going into Waterstones in Belfast and just thinking, "Oh my God, there's a new one!" Like I didn't even know. Like I just remember it being like such a big thing. And the Aragon series,
Oh man.
obsessed. You know, I was so obsessed with that series. I was obsessed with all the lore. So I used to actually print out pages on the Wikipedia. And I remember I used to sit in religious studies classes in school. Now, apologies to anyone who ever listens to this, like my mother, who will frown upon this, because I like was never a religious kid, and we had these classes at school. And I used to sit in the back of the room and read all about the Aragon lore instead of actually doing my work on Jesus and stuff.
Don't worry about it, babe. I was writing fan fiction on notebook paper like mid class in like 7th grade and
Yeah.
up. Yeah, no work was getting done.
All the fan fiction I think I wrote in the school library when we were supposed to be doing research papers. So
Love it. It's like your Roman Empire of like where it all began.
Yeah.
You did make me remember, both of you talking about your angsty teenage romance era, that that all kind of became popular like a little later for me because of our age difference, I think. But I definitely had a Nicholas Sparks era.
Oh my god, no.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. I've read a lot of Nicholas Sparks and similar like kind of tragic romances too, and like stuff like that. Like Atonement was huge because the movie came out, and like
See, you said Nicholas Sparks, and automatically my brain started singing like When I Look at You from the you get me?
Yeah.
Hugh Miley Cyrus.
God, I forgot Nicholas Sparks even existed.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to reread those books, but I don't know if my brain could handle it.
To be honest, I think if those books had more spice, they'd be perfection.
Yeah,
They'd be really good. It's just that
I agree.
Forward. Yeah.
So yeah, by 15, The Shadowhunters, another big one. Mortal Instruments, Infernal Devices, and then sort of like that continued into sort of the YA thing. I still love anything Shadowhunters to this day. I know for a fact that there's a trilogy coming, and then it's going to be like the end of the Shadowhunter books, and I'm so upset. Like, I know that there's 26 odd books already, and there's going to be about 26 books, but like, I'm heartbroken, and I will die on that hill. I know that it needs to end at some point, but why does it have to be now?
See, I fully missed the boat on that series. Like, I think it was just a little too late for me.
I highly recommend it. I mean, obviously it's going to be intimidating starting it now when there's like quite literally 20 odd books, but I highly recommend like jumping in. My sister-in-law's just started reading them and she's having a great time. So
I still love them.
I remember when I was like 21, one of my roommate was reading, I think it was only a trilogy at the time, but she was reading them.
Oh man. Yeah.
Crazy. And I suppose then going into YA, I was doing some research specifically because I wanted to figure out when I actually started getting into Sarah J Maas, because Sarah J Maas has been like, other than Cassandra Clare and like her Shadowhunter book, Sarah J Maas has like been the thing for me. And I figured out that I started reading Sarah J Maas in 2016. So I was just turning 18 when I just got into her book. So whenever it came to Throne of Glass, I read Throne of Glass the whole way to Empire of Storms, but Empire of Storms was like just out as I got into the series, and then I had to wait for Tower of Dawn and Kingdom of the Ash to come out, and then the same with ACOTAR, but ACOTAR started coming out later. So ACOTAR and Akamath were out in 2016, or Akamath had just been released. I think, Molly, you kind of read those as they were coming out as well.
Yeah, so I started reading them when Akamath had just been released, and I was waiting for the books, and I started Throne of Glass while I was waiting.
Okay. And maybe this depends on how you guys found the book, but for me, I love the Throne of Glass series. I would recommend it to anybody, but for me, it was definitely a bit of a slog to get through because there are some pacing things throughout, and the books also have a very big tonal shift, let's say, in around the third and fourth books.
Book 3, yeah.
Yeah, so keeping that in mind, like that you started reading them when all the way through Empire of Storms was out, obviously I'm assuming you kind of like went through them quickly, and then you had to wait. How did you feel about Tower of Dawn when it came out? For me, going straight from Empire of Storms to Tower of Dawn, I struggled hard. I did not do the tandem read as many people do. And I do not wish that I had done it because I think I would have hated it even more, to be honest. But
I will let Molly go for this one first because she has thoughts.
So I the first time I read Tower of Dawn, I didn't read it as a tandem because it came out after I was already a fan, and the concept of a tandem read didn't exist yet because we didn't quite know what the format was like. And I remember going to the Sarah J. Maas London signing for it and thinking, why the hell did she write a book from Kale's perspective? And are you fucking kidding me? Am I gonna have to wait at least a whole year, if not 2, to find out what happens with the people that I genuinely like? Like, are you fucking kidding me? I was fuming, all right? Like, I was all for, like, what's going to happen with Aelin? What's happening with Rowan? Don't know. We have to read a whole, like, 600, 700-page book about Kale. Kale.
It's only 600 pages. It feels longer.
I was the same. I actually, and like I don't say this so that I will say this on this podcast and never say this again. So, you know, this will never hear the light of day. I DNF'd the book.
You DNF'd it?
DNF'd Tower of Dawn. So what happened was I read about, I want to say about a third to a half. And then I realized that I was only interested in the chapters that weren't about Kale. I was interested in the other characters, Nezrin, and also the other female character that links in with Kale in those chapters. I was only interested in those 2.
Valid.
So I actually DNF'd it, and I didn't pick it back up again until the day before until the day before Kingdom of Ash came out, and then I read it in one sitting.
That's amazing.
That's brave.
In one afternoon. Yeah. So I've read it. I mean, I've read it since. Like, I've tandem read it and I've read it normally since. But I have so much respect for the girlies that were reading these books when they came out that didn't have the tandem read option, because it was rough out here. And see, whenever you knew that you were getting a new book and then you got the book and you were like, what the fuck do you mean this is about Kale?
Yeah.
Like,
so for me, I am like too much of a, and I don't mean this to sound pretentious, I'm not judging anybody who does tandem reads, but I am too much of a purist for tandem reads. When I experience a series for the first time, I want to experience what people experienced as they were coming
out. I read it as they came out, I'm the same.
So I always do published date order. It's the other reason that I like dislike how I did Assassin's Blade, because the bundle that I got on ebook had it at the end, and so I just sort of forgot about it until I was actually past Queen of Shadows, and then I randomly read it in the middle. But the whole thing was just, I mean, I was just sitting there reading Empire of Storms like, okay, this is great. It does have some pacing issues, but this is great. And then I get to the end of it and I'm like, wait. So people had to wait, like, and read about Kale and stuff. Like, exactly what Molly's saying. Like, I was like, that must have been the worst.
It was the equivalent of getting socks for Christmas when you were, like, a kid. Like, thanks.
Yeah. That's really interesting, though, what you say as well about Assassin's Blade, because Assassin's Blade was out when I started reading Throne of Glass. Like, it existed. It was a thing. It was out. but I actually never read Assassin's Blade until I finished Kingdom of Ash. And I can't remember exactly why I did that, because I had the book. This is the thing, is like I had the book from 2016 the whole way until Kingdom of Ash came out, and I didn't read it. And part of me, I think my reasoning was I want to read the complete series and then read this book, but I know that it belongs nicely around the third or fourth book in the series, but I just didn't read it then.
Well, okay, here's the thing. I know that people have that experience. I think that if I had read it right before Queen of Shadows, like you're quote unquote supposed to, I would have been very
Put
angry.
off.
Yeah, very put off. Because, and I think I can say this without spoilers, there is a tragic love story that happens, and like the way that relationship is remembered later, the way she thinks about it,
and the way that it was in that book, it's different.
It's completely different. Like, it's very, like, because she's, like 16 in that book, and it's a very 16-year-old romance, and it's very, very YA, and I mean YA in the sense of, like, there's a kiss happening in the sewers that's supposed to be really romantic, and I'm just like, what do you mean we're in a sewage system right now? And, like...
Yeah.
And, like, they're never on the same page, really, like, and then when you read about it later, it's like, oh, it was this big, beautiful, epic love. And it's like, that is not what I read. Like, that is not what happened. So I think that I actually got more emotionally out of the first 4 books than I would have if I had read Assassin's Blade in any of the preferred orders, because
I definitely think reading it last was a good thing for me.
Yeah.
I feel like being able to look back at it and being able to see her view that romance in that way is very much akin to how you do view your first like childhood crush or your first love as a grown-up, like for the most part, unless it was like completely horrific, you look back and be like, that was sweet, like that was the first instance of somebody that isn't a parent or family that you have that kind of connection with. And even though you logically go, yeah, it was a bit crap, like it wasn't really a relationship, or that it had these faults, like we had this kiss in the sewer, but you're going to look back and think, that was my first love, that was my first first person perspective.
That's interesting, because that's not really how I take how she remembers it. Like, how I take how she remembers it is like, that was endgame. Like, that was it for me. That was going to be it for me. We were going to ride off into the sunset, and that would have worked out. Like, to me, it's very much sort of a rose-colored delusion almost.
Yeah, I feel a bit like that. I feel like it's a bit of both for me. I feel like part of me feels like the way she remembers it is this could have been like such a big thing. Like, if this was still a thing today, it would trump everything else.
I mean, literally, she thinks like, oh, you would have been a great other title. And that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hilarious, isn't it? Like, just thinking like about a person and only seeing the good things, rather than acknowledging that he was a child. We were children. Like, there was no way in hell that he wouldn't have developed and been a completely different human being had they been given the chance to. And like you say, it's like rose-colored glasses. You're looking through the eyes of somebody who thinks like this is the ideal.
Especially because the entirety of Assassin's Blade, and I think part of why things work out the way they do, is because she spends that entire period of her life and all the way until like the 3rd book kind of running from her destiny, like running from like the inevitable duty that she has, and that's the basis of their relationship, is running away. And so I think like that doesn't really work, like that wouldn't have worked out, because at some point like it would have caught up with her.
Yeah. It was a lot of delusion on what their life could have been, but not, like, obviously, as you said, her life would have caught up with her, and like it never could have happened. It was all built in a fantasy.
It would be like, that would be what she'd want her life to be if she was a normal person. Like, if she was that character she was in the first book, if that makes sense. Like, if she could just be that person rather than the actual,
rather than
person
what
she was. Yeah.
But I think that's also the other thing about that that's funny is that what she wants out of being a regular person is actually to be like a rich person, like for
Yeah.
sure. She really likes nice things, and what they were doing would never have, like, I don't know how they would have found that, like she would have struggled. So it's just interesting. It just feels like on multiple levels that never could have worked. And I think part of that is because of the way Sarah pivoted the story. Like maybe she planned it differently originally, but yeah, I think it's interesting for sure. Okay, so I think we're about ready to wrap it up for this week. So before we go, let's discuss though, what are we planning on reading this week? What are we reading right now, and what are we reading into the next week? Do you want to start, Ali?
I can. So I am currently trying to aggressively get through my to be read pile for this month before the end of the month hits. I feel like it's not going to happen. There's a million books on there, but I'm currently about to, obviously I'm still trying to just get through the end of Gothicana, but I'm sort of I want to finish the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore because it's just out by Laurie Gilmore, and An Education in Malice, so just to continue my dark academia vibe. And I haven't read anything by S.D. Gibson yet, so I'd really like to get that read in the next sort of week or so. And A Pirate's Life for Tea just came out, a cozy fantasy, so maybe if I have time, pop that one, or Assistant to the Villain. I have a lot of books on my to be read pile until the end of this month that I'm 100% not going to get through, but that's where I want to be. That's where I want to be.
Preach.
What about you, Crimson?
For me, I'm still chugging away at Fourth Wing. I'm hoping to finish that up this week. Like I said, I've just passed the threshing, so I think I'm around the 40 or 50% mark. Loving the way it's building up, having a great time. And then my other hopefuls this week include Wolf Song, which, again, all I know about it is gay werewolves, so sounds fab.
That sounds like a good time.
It does.
That's all I need to know. Exactly. And it's part of a whole series, I think, so it should be fun. And then I think we're supposed to start a Twilight buddy read this week, so I need to go head to the bookstore and pick that up and get that started too.
Hell yeah.
And what about you, Molly?
So it's Vampathon because it is spooky season. It is Halloween. So Jodie at Vanilla Moon X on YouTube runs Vampathon every year, and she has a ton of, cute little tasks and things to, like, prompts to read. So I have a jam-packed TBR for the weekend and the week ahead. The likelihood being that I'll not get to all of them, but on my TBR is obviously starting Twilight with you girls. Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I know I'm, jumping on the bandwagon way late, especially considering how much I love Ali Hazelwood. Carmilla, Fangs. I was thinking of Assistant to the Vampire, but I'm not too sure. Court of the Vampire Queen by Katie Robert, and Blood Moon by Gillian Graves. So
I'd like to read Court of the Vampire Queen. It looks really good.
It looks so good.
I have read it. I will buddy read it with you guys. It is so fun. It's actually originally 4 novellas. So like keep that in mind when you're reading it, that it feels like 4 distinct like chunks of story. But they are all, like in chronological order, so they're really cool. It's a really fun smutty read.
Oh, great.
That sounds good.
Excellent. Sign me up.
It's more smut than plot, for sure.
Sometimes you need that though.
It's what we live for.
Definitely. Okay, so thank you for listening, and thank for you two guys being here and yapping with me as usual. And I suppose just for anyone listening, all of the links to any of our social medias, including TikTok, Instagram, and individual Instagrams, TikToks, YouTubes, etc., will be listed down below. And we will see you next week for a new episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.